On the morning of June 6, 1944, the largest seaborne invasion in history began on the coast of Normandy. To the soldiers approaching France in landing craft, aircraft, gliders, and warships, it did not feel like a single grand event. It felt like darkness, cold water, engine noise, seasickness, fear, and orders shouted over gunfire. But strategically, this was the moment the Western Allies had been building toward for years. The Normandy landings were the opening assault of Operation Overlord, the campaign designed to force a return to German-occupied Western Europe. The landings themselves were codenamed Operation Neptune, while the day became known simply as D-Day. Its purpose was not only to capture beaches. The real goal was to create a foothold strong enough to bring in armies, vehicles, supplies, and air power, then push inland through France. If that foothold failed, the liberation of Western Europe could be delayed dramatically. If it held, Germany would face a major front in the west while already under pressure in the east. Planning for D-Day began in 1943, long before the first landing craft reached the French shore. The Allies needed more than courage and numbers. They needed timing, secrecy, coordination, and an extraordinary logistical system. Hundreds of thousands of men had to be trained, equipped, transported, and supplied. Ships had to be gathered. Aircraft had to be assigned. Specialized vehicles had to be developed for obstacles, mines, and armored support. The invasion also depended on narrow natural conditions. Planners needed a particular combination of moonlight, tide, and time of day. The moon mattered for airborne troops navigating at night. The tide mattered because beach obstacles had to be visible but not leave soldiers exposed for too long. The weather mattered because the channel could turn an invasion fleet into chaos. This is why D-Day was not simply scheduled like an ordinary military movement. Only a few days each month were suitable, and when bad weather forced a delay, the entire operation came close to being pushed back for weeks. One of the most important parts of the invasion happened before the invasion itself: deception. The Allies launched a broad deception campaign known as Operation Bodyguard to confuse the German command about where and when the main attack would come. This mattered because the Germans knew an invasion was coming. What they did not know was whether Normandy was the real target or merely a diversion. The Allies worked to make the Pas-de-Calais, the narrowest part of the channel, appear to be the likely landing area. False signals, misleading intelligence, fake formations, and controlled leaks all helped build the illusion. The objective was not to make Germany ignore the coast. That would have been impossible. The goal was to spread German attention, slow their response, and keep reserves away from Normandy at the crucial moment. On D-Day, every hour mattered. If German armored reserves had moved quickly and decisively against the beachheads, the Allied position could have been far more vulnerable. Germany's answer to the expected invasion was the Atlantic Wall, a massive defensive system along the coast of occupied Europe. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel was placed in command of strengthening defenses in the west, and he understood that the first hours of an invasion would be decisive. Once the Allies established a secure beachhead, their industrial power and supply system could become overwhelming. So Rommel emphasized obstacles, mines, fortified positions, gun emplacements, and beach defenses intended to break the landings before they could build momentum. The Normandy shore was therefore not an empty strip of sand waiting to be crossed. It was a prepared battlefield. Wooden stakes, metal obstacles, barbed wire, mined approaches, concrete bunkers, and guns overlooking the beaches created a layered danger. The defenses were not equally strong everywhere, and German command decisions were complicated by confusion and deception. But for the men in the first waves, the strategic uncertainty above them mattered less than the immediate reality ahead: open beach, enemy fire, and almost no cover. The invasion began shortly after midnight, before the beach landings were visible from the sea. Around 24,000 American, British, and Canadian airborne troops were dropped or landed behind German lines. Their mission was to seize key bridges, disrupt communications, block counterattacks, and protect the flanks of the amphibious assault. Airborne operations were dangerous by design. Troops were scattered by darkness, weather, anti-aircraft fire, and navigation problems. Many landed far from their intended zones. Yet this scattering sometimes created confusion for the Germans, who suddenly faced small Allied groups appearing in unexpected places. At the same time, aerial and naval bombardments struck German positions along the coast. These bombardments were intended to weaken defenses before the infantry arrived, but they could not eliminate every bunker, gun, or machine gun nest. The landings would still require men to cross exposed beaches under fire. D-Day was therefore not one attack, but several overlapping operations: airborne, naval, aerial, engineering, infantry, armor, and logistics all unfolding at once. At about 6:30 in the morning, Allied troops began landing across an 80-kilometer stretch of Normandy coast divided into 5 sectors: Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword. Each beach had its own geography, defenders, and problems. Strong winds pushed some landing craft east of their intended positions, especially at Utah and Omaha. This kind of error could have been disastrous because plans were tied to specific exits, defenses, and support. Yet war rarely follows clean diagrams. At Utah, landing in the wrong place turned out to be less damaging than expected because the defenses were lighter than at the original target area. At Omaha, by contrast, terrain and German resistance combined to create a brutal fight. Across all 5 beaches, the first waves faced mined sand, obstacles, deep water, confusion, and the difficulty of turning a contested shoreline into a working entry point for an army. The objective was not merely to survive the landing, but to move inland quickly enough that the beaches did not become traps. Omaha Beach became the bloodiest of the 5 landing zones. Its geography made the assault especially punishing. High cliffs and bluffs overlooked the beach, giving German defenders strong fields of fire. Many landing craft arrived off target or under difficult conditions, and some armored support failed to arrive effectively where it was needed. Soldiers came ashore into a landscape of obstacles, mines, and gunfire, often with units mixed together and officers killed or separated. In this environment, progress depended on small groups improvising under extreme pressure. Men found gaps, climbed slopes, cut through wire, attacked strongpoints, and slowly opened exits from the beach. Omaha is remembered not because everything went according to plan, but because so much went wrong and the assault still eventually succeeded. The cost was severe, and the experience shows a central truth about D-Day: planning made the invasion possible, but the outcome also depended on individual initiative at moments when plans broke down. The other beaches had their own intense battles. At Gold, Juno, and Sword, British and Canadian forces faced fortified towns, obstacles, and defended positions. Some fighting moved quickly from the sand into villages and streets, where house-to-house combat was required to clear German defenders. Specialized tanks played an important role, especially in dealing with obstacles and strongpoints. At Gold, 2 major gun emplacements were disabled with the help of specialized armor, showing how the Allies tried to solve beach problems with engineering as well as infantry. Juno saw fierce resistance and significant casualties, yet Canadian forces pushed inland with determination. Sword brought Allied troops closest to the important city of Cannes, a major objective that would prove much harder to capture than hoped. These beaches are sometimes overshadowed by Omaha, but they were not easy landings. Each sector demanded coordination between infantry, engineers, armor, naval fire, and air support under battlefield conditions that were chaotic from the first minutes. By the end of June 6, the Allies had achieved the essential objective: they had established beachheads at all 5 landing sites. That success did not mean the day had gone exactly as planned. Several objectives remained out of reach. Corentin, St. Lo, and Bayeux were still in German hands. Cannes, one of the major targets, would not be captured until July 21. Even the beaches themselves were not all linked immediately. Juno and Gold connected on the first day, but all 5 beachheads were not joined until June 12. This is crucial for understanding D-Day properly. The landings were a beginning, not a complete victory. A beachhead is fragile until it is connected, supplied, expanded, and defended against counterattack. The Allies had opened the door, but the battle for Normandy was still ahead. What D-Day accomplished was to make that larger campaign possible by creating a physical foothold in occupied France. The human cost of the Normandy landings was enormous. Allied casualties on D-Day were at least 10,000, with 4,414 confirmed dead. German casualties are estimated at between 4,000 and 9,000 men. These numbers represent more than military statistics. They reflect the price of forcing a defended coastline under modern weapons, mines, artillery, and machine guns. Casualties were not evenly distributed. Omaha suffered the heaviest losses among the beaches, while airborne troops also endured dangerous drops, scattered landings, and isolated combat. The cost was accepted because the strategic stakes were immense. Without a successful landing, the Western Allies could not easily bring their armies into France. Without a Western front, Germany could concentrate differently, and the liberation of occupied countries would be delayed. The tragedy of D-Day is that its success required thousands of men to enter a battle where survival often depended on seconds, terrain, chance, and the actions of people they would never meet. D-Day succeeded because many different systems worked together, even when parts of them failed. Deception slowed German certainty. Airborne troops disrupted the rear. Naval power carried the invasion force and supported the beaches. Engineers cleared obstacles under fire. Infantry pushed through defended exits. Commanders adapted when landings went off course. Weather decisions, intelligence work, logistics, and industrial production all shaped the result. This is why the Normandy landings remain one of the most studied operations in military history. They were not won by a single weapon, a single commander, or a single beach. They were won by the combination of preparation and improvisation. The Allies did not capture every objective on the first day, but they did enough. They got ashore, stayed ashore, and began building the route through which men and supplies could flow into Europe. In a campaign measured by months, the first day's achievement was simple but decisive: the invasion had not been thrown back into the sea. The wider significance of the Normandy landings lies in what followed. The operation began the liberation of France and the rest of Western Europe, and it laid the foundation for Allied victory on the Western Front. But its meaning also comes from the narrowness of the moment. A delay in weather, a failure of deception, a faster German response, or a collapse at the beaches could have changed the timeline of the war. Instead, D-Day created a permanent Allied presence in France. From that foothold, the Normandy campaign expanded, Paris would eventually be liberated, and Germany would face pressure from both West and East. The landings are remembered as a turning point not because they ended the war immediately, but because they made the end visible in a new way. On one long morning, across 5 beaches, the Allies transformed years of planning into a physical breach in Nazi-occupied Europe. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.